My name is Kayla Morgan, 28 years old. When the President of the United States saluted me and said, "You saved more than anyone will ever fully know," my entire world shifted. But before that moment, I was nothing more than a disappointment in my family's eyes. Before I tell you how the President of the United States changed everything, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. My story might just change how you see the people in uniform around you. I was born into a family where reputation was everything. My dad, Dr. Richard Morgan, was the kind of guy who could silence a room with a single raised eyebrow. World-famous economics professor, jetting off to lecture in Paris or Tokyo, always with a stack of papers under his arm and a reputation that preceded him. My mom, Dr. Evelyn Morgan, was no slouch either. A biochemist with enough awards to fill a display case, her name etched in the kind of journals most people can't even pronounce. Then there was Dylan, my older brother, the golden boy who seemed to have a law degree tattooed on his forehead by age 10. Straight A's, Ivy League, corner office in a New York law firm before he was old enough to rent a car. And me? I was Kayla, the one who didn't quite fit the Morgan family blueprint. From the moment I could walk, my parents planned my future like a business strategy. Science camps every summer, private tutors drilling me on calculus before I could spell algebra. Dinner table talk was all Harvard this, Yale that, Johns Hopkins if we were feeling humble. "You'll be a doctor, Kayla," my mom would say, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. A real doctor. Not because I dreamed of it, but because it polished the family's shiny image. My bedroom? It was a shrine to their ambitions. Medical textbooks lined the shelves before I hit puberty. Posters of molecular structures stared down at me where my doodles of spaceships and dragons used to hang. Even my friends were handpicked. Kids of other professors, mini geniuses with their eyes on Nobel Prizes. I played along, followed the script, did what I was told. Until one day, when I was 9, I stumbled across something that cracked the whole plan wide open. It was at my grandfather's house, rummaging through his attic like kids do, when I found it. A tarnished military badge tucked in a dusty drawer. My grandfather, a combat medic in World War II, wasn't like the rest of my family. He didn't talk much, especially not about the war. But that day, he caught me holding the badge and his eyes lit up in a way I'd never seen. He sat me down, his voice low and steady, and said, "Kayla, I didn't save the world in some high-tech lab. I did it one soldier at a time, in the mud, with blood on my hands and bullets flying overhead." Those words hit me like a freight train. They burrowed deep, planting a seed I didn't even know was growing. Because while my parents were pushing me toward ivory towers and corner offices, all I wanted was to matter. Not in some abstract resume-building way. I wanted to feel it. To make a difference you could touch, like my grandfather had. High school was fine. I wasn't Dylan-level brilliant, but I held my own. B+ average, captain of the swim team. SAT scores that were solid but not Ivy League material. My guidance counselor called me well-rounded. My parents? They called me a disappointment. I can still hear my mom's voice, cold as ice, when she read my college rejection letters. "Your brother had perfect scores, Kayla. He had his pick of schools. And this is what you bring us?" That spring, a military recruiter set up a table at school. Most kids breezed past it, chasing their AP classes or prom dates. But I stopped. Sergeant Alana Reyes stood there, tall and unyielding, her uniform crisp as a blade. She didn't talk about glory or adventure. She talked about purpose, about saving lives when the stakes were real. When it was just you, your skills, and someone bleeding out in front of you. It was like my grandfather was speaking through her. I ended up at the state university my parents grudgingly settled for. One semester in, I was drowning. Not in coursework, but in the weight of a life I didn't choose. I couldn't stop thinking about that recruiter's table, about that badge, about my grandfather's words. So I made a choice. The kind of choice that changes everything. I enlisted in the Army, specializing in combat medicine. I wanted to be a field medic, just like my grandfather. I wanted to save lives in the chaos, with dirt under my nails and my heart pounding. I knew my parents would lose it. But nothing could have prepared me for the firestorm waiting at that dinner table when I told them. I chose the worst possible moment to drop the bomb. Dinner at the Morgan house was never just a meal, it was a performance. My dad at the head of the table, swirling his wine like he was auditioning for a movie. My mom, slicing her steak with surgical precision, every move screaming control. Dylan, smirking like he owned the room, tossing out witty one-liners about his latest courtroom victory. And me, Kayla, trying to find the courage to rewrite my life in the middle of their perfectly scripted scene. I set my fork down, took a deep breath, and let it rip. I'm enlisting in the Army. I'm going to be a combat medic. The silence hit like a sucker punch. You could have heard a pin drop on the hardwood. My dad froze, staring at his glass like I'd just confessed to robbing a bank. My mom's eyes fluttered shut, her lips trembling, not with tears, but with the kind of rage that could melt steel. Dylan? He just laughed, that sharp, condescending chuckle that made my blood boil. The Army? My dad finally said, the word dripping with disdain, like it was something he'd scrape off his shoe. Kayla, my mom whispered, her voice low and lethal. Where did we go wrong with you? Not a question. A verdict. Guilty as charged. Dylan leaned back, his knife hitting the plate with a theatrical clink. Oh, this is good, he said, grinning like a shark. What's next, Kayla? You gonna play Call of Duty in real life? Is this a midlife crisis at 19? It's not a game, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. I want to save lives, Dylan, like Grandpa did. My dad's head snapped up, his jaw so tight I thought it might crack. Don't you dare compare yourself to him, he said. Your grandfather served because he had to. Then he built a real life, a respectable life. You? You're throwing away every advantage we gave you. Private schools, tutors, connections, to go play hero in the dirt? I stared at my plate, the untouched mashed potatoes blurring as my eyes burned. I'm not playing hero, I said. I'm choosing something real, something that matters. Spare me the noble nonsense, he shot back. You're running from hard work, from responsibility, from the life we built for you. I turned to my mom, desperate for a lifeline. Maybe she'd see me, really see me for once. But her eyes were cold, glistening with something worse than anger. Disappointment so deep it felt like betrayal. You're not cut out for this, Kayla, she said. The military is for kids with no options. You have everything, and you're throwing it away. That was the gut punch, the lie they'd polished to a shine. I had options, sure. Their options. A life carved out for me before I could even spell my name. A life that felt like a straitjacket. Dylan, of course, couldn't resist piling on. Let's be real, he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. You've always been average, B's, not A's. Decent, not dazzling. The Army's perfect for you. Someone hands you a checklist, tells you where to stand, what to do. No need to think too hard. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to tell them they didn't know me at all. But instead, I stood up, legs shaking, and walked upstairs to my room, the one still suffocating under those damn molecular posters, relics of a life I never wanted. On my desk sat 2 envelopes. One, the State University acceptance letter, my parents' consolation prize. The other, my enlistment papers, my ticket to a life that felt like mine. I picked up the second one, held it like it was my grandfather's badge, heavy with purpose. By morning, I was gone. The house was quiet as I slipped out, the weight of their expectations falling off my shoulders with every step. I didn't know what lay ahead, only that it was my choice, my fight, my chance to matter. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. Basic training wasn't just a test. It was a forge. It took the soft, uncertain edges of who I was and hammered them into something stronger, sharper. I didn't break. I was remade. Every morning I woke up before dawn, muscles screaming, stomach growling, eyes burning from too little sleep. I learned to push through it all, through the chaos of simulated gunfire, the weight of a 200-pound dummy I had to drag across a field while keeping a tourniquet tight. I learned to think when my heart was racing, to act when fear clawed at my chest. For the first time, nobody gave a damn about my last name or my parents' degrees. All that mattered was whether I could keep someone alive when the world was falling apart. And I could. God, I could. When I graduated from advanced individual training, I stood tall in my uniform, every stitch earned through sweat and grit. The weight of it felt right, like armor I'd forged myself. I wasn't just Kayla Morgan anymore. I was a combat medic, ready to save lives in the places most people run from. I carried that pride like a torch, hoping it might light the way home. I was naive enough to think my family might see it too. Christmas rolled around, and I showed up at the house, my dress blues pressed to perfection, ribbons pinned just right. I even brought a little photo album, snapshots of my unit, the field hospital, my certificate of excellence. Proof, I thought, that I was becoming someone worth seeing, someone worth knowing. My mom was in the kitchen, rolling out pie crust like it was her life's mission. She barely looked up. "Oh, good," she said, her voice flat as the dough. "You brought your costume." Dylan, lounging at the counter, snorted into his coffee. "Nice cosplay, sis. They give you a toy stethoscope to go with it?" I forced a laugh, setting the album down like it was no big deal. "They're just joking," I told myself. "They don't mean it." But the air felt heavy, like the room was holding its breath, waiting for me to shrink back into the Kayla they knew, the one who never measured up. My dad didn't even bother with the jab. He just changed the subject, like my presence was a minor inconvenience. Dinner was more of the same. The table buzzed with Dylan's latest triumph, a big job offer from some fancy firm, and his girlfriend's Instagram-worthy trip to Tuscany. They passed around her phone, oohing and awing over vineyard selfies, while I sat there, my fork hovering over my plate, invisible. They didn't ask about my training, my unit, or the lives I was learning to save. Not a single question. I might as well have been a ghost. That night, I sat alone in the guest room. No longer my room. Not with those molecular posters still mocking me from the walls. I stared at the ceiling, fighting the sting in my eyes. How could they be so proud of Dylan, with his slick suits and oil company contracts, and so ashamed of me? Me, who was training to pull soldiers back from the brink, to hold life in my hands when everything else was chaos? I clutched the photo album to my chest, the one my mom hadn't even opened. In that moment, I realized something. Their pride wasn't mine to earn. Not anymore. I'd found my purpose, my fight, my place in the world. And if they couldn't see it, that was their loss. Not mine. They didn't know I was headed to war. How could they? They'd stopped seeing me long before I got the call. When my deployment orders to Afghanistan came, I sat on my bunk, staring at the paper, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and purpose. I called home, not expecting a parade, but hoping for something. A "be safe," "we're proud," hell, even a "we love you." Instead, my mom's voice came through the line, flat as the desert I was about to land in. "Afghanistan," she said. Well, that was bound to happen. My dad chimed in, his tone clipped. "Just don't do anything foolish, Kayla. No heroics." That was it. No questions, no warmth. Just a dial tone and the echo of their indifference. Out there, mail call was a lifeline for most. My bunkmates would tear into care packages, chocolate chip cookies, handwritten notes from moms, goofy drawings from kids. Me? I got silence. When someone asked about my family, I'd shrug and mumble, "They're busy," or "we're not close." I couldn't bring myself to say the truth. They were ashamed of me. To them, I was a failure, a smudge on the Morgan family crest. But in Afghanistan, I wasn't a failure. I was a goddamn force. When the world turned to chaos, I was the one they called. An explosion would rip through the air, and while others ducked, I ran toward it. I carried a bleeding soldier through a storm of sand and gunfire, my hands steady even as my pulse thundered. I knelt beside a kid not much older than me, holding his hand as he whispered his wife's name, his breaths slowing until they stopped. I didn't have time to cry then. I had to keep moving, keep saving, keep fighting. I earned a commendation medal after an ambush that could have been my last day. Staff Sergeant Cooper was hit bad, blood pouring from his side. For 14 minutes, I kept him alive under fire, my hands on his wound, my voice calm, my mind racing but never breaking. When the chopper finally came, he grabbed my arm and said, "You've got ice in your veins, Morgan." I called home that night, my voice shaky with pride and exhaustion, wanting to share it, to feel seen. My mom's response? "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Dylan made junior partner?" I hung up without a word, sat in my tent, staring into the dark, the weight of it all pressing down. They'd never see me, not the real me. They wanted a daughter who'd play their game. Perfect grades, Ivy League, a stethoscope dangling from her neck like a status symbol. But I wasn't their puppet anymore. 3 months later, I pinned on sergeant stripes. My CO called my leadership in trauma instinctive and exceptional. My unit didn't just respect me. They trusted me with their lives. They came to me with shrapnel wounds and nightmares, with fears they couldn't say out loud. I was their medic, their anchor, their sister in arms. I was naive enough to think my family might see it too. Christmas rolled around, and I showed up at the house, my dress blues pressed to perfection, ribbons pinned just right. I even brought a little photo album, snapshots of my unit, the field hospital, my certificate of excellence. Proof, I thought, that I was becoming someone worth seeing, someone worth knowing. My mom was in the kitchen, rolling out pie crust like it was her life's mission. She barely looked up. "Oh, good," she said, her voice flat as the dough. "You brought your costume." Dylan, lounging at the counter, snorted into his coffee. "Nice cosplay, sis. They give you a toy stethoscope to go with it?" I forced a laugh, setting the album down like it was no big deal. "They're just joking," I told myself. "They don't mean it." But the air felt heavy, like the room was holding its breath, waiting for me to shrink back into the Kayla they knew, the one who never measured up. My dad didn't even bother with the jab. He just changed the subject, like my presence was a minor inconvenience. Dinner was more of the same. The table buzzed with Dylan's latest triumph, a big job offer from some fancy firm, and his girlfriend's Instagram-worthy trip to Tuscany. They passed around her phone, oohing and awing over vineyard selfies, while I sat there, my fork hovering over my plate, invisible. They didn't ask about my training, my unit, or the lives I was learning to save. Not a single question. I might as well have been a ghost. That night, I sat alone in the guest room. No longer my room. Not with those molecular posters still mocking me from the walls. I stared at the ceiling, fighting the sting in my eyes. How could they be so proud of Dylan, with his slick suits and oil company contracts, and so ashamed of me? Me, who was training to pull soldiers back from the brink, to hold life in my hands when everything else was chaos? I clutched the photo album to my chest, the one my mom hadn't even opened. In that moment, I realized something. Their pride wasn't mine to earn. Not anymore. I'd found my purpose, my fight, my place in the world. And if they couldn't see it, that was their loss. Not mine. They didn't know I was headed to war. How could they? They'd stopped seeing me long before I got the call. When my deployment orders to Afghanistan came, I sat on my bunk, staring at the paper, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and purpose. I called home, not expecting a parade, but hoping for something. A "be safe," "we're proud," hell, even a "we love you." Instead, my mom's voice came through the line, flat as the desert I was about to land in. "Afghanistan," she said. Well, that was bound to happen. My dad chimed in, his tone clipped. "Just don't do anything foolish, Kayla. No heroics." That was it. No questions, no warmth. Just a dial tone and the echo of their indifference. Out there, mail call was a lifeline for most. My bunkmates would tear into care packages, chocolate chip cookies, handwritten notes from moms, goofy drawings from kids. Me? I got silence. When someone asked about my family, I'd shrug and mumble, "They're busy," or "We're not close." I couldn't bring myself to say the truth. They were ashamed of me. To them, I was a failure, a smudge on the Morgan family crest. But in Afghanistan, I wasn't a failure. I was a goddamn force. When the world turned to chaos, I was the one they called. An explosion would rip through the air, and while others ducked, I ran toward it. I carried a bleeding soldier through a storm of sand and gunfire, my hands steady even as my pulse thundered. I knelt beside a kid not much older than me, holding his hand as he whispered his wife's name, his breaths slowing until they stopped. I didn't have time to cry then. I had to keep moving, keep saving, keep fighting. I earned a commendation medal after an ambush that could have been my last day. Staff Sergeant Cooper was hit bad, blood pouring from his side. For 14 minutes, I kept him alive under fire, my hands on his wound, my voice calm, my mind racing but never breaking. When the chopper finally came, he grabbed my arm and said, "You've got ice in your veins, Morgan." I called home that night, my voice shaky with pride and exhaustion, wanting to share it, to feel seen. My mom's response? "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Dylan made junior partner?" I hung up without a word, sat in my tent, staring into the dark, the weight of it all pressing down. They'd never see me, not the real me. They wanted a daughter who'd play their game. Perfect grades, Ivy League, a stethoscope dangling from her neck like a status symbol. But I wasn't their puppet anymore. 3 months later, I pinned on sergeant stripes. My CO called my leadership in trauma instinctive and exceptional. My unit didn't just respect me. They trusted me with their lives. They came to me with shrapnel wounds and nightmares, with fears they couldn't say out loud. I was their medic, their anchor, their sister in arms. Then I pulled out my letter. I read it, every word, letting it sink in. Your worth is not measured by their understanding. I whispered it like a prayer, over and over until the pain in my leg faded behind the fire in my chest. I wasn't their failure. I was Doctor. I was Sergeant Kayla Morgan. I was the one who ran toward the fire, who held lives in my hands, who carried my team through hell. And that was more than enough. I'd just limped out of rehab, my leg patched up, my soul held together with duct tape and grit. I was ready for a quiet posting. Some hospital base, maybe a desk to ride out the rest of my tour. Instead, my CO slid a manila folder across the table, sealed tight, stamped, classified in red. "Special Operations Medical Team," he said. "Immediate transfer." I blinked, my throat tight. "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you're the one they asked for by name." For the first time in years, I felt something raw and real. Dignity. Not the kind you borrow or beg for. The kind you earn, carved out of blood and sand and choices no one else could understand. The training was hell on steroids. Trauma simulations that left me shaking, running on fumes and adrenaline. Surgery drills in the back of a bouncing Humvee, my hands steady while the world rocked. Treating wounds underwater, blindfolded, upside down with instructors screaming in my ear. Psych evals that stripped me bare, made me question if I even knew myself. 1 in 5 medics made it through. I was one of them. Not because I was fearless, because I had nothing left to lose. Then came the mission. Silent retrieval. The objective was clear and brutal. Extract 3 American aid workers from a fortified compound in the Afghan mountains. Intel gave them 48 hours before they'd be moved or killed, their deaths broadcast for the world to see. Our 12-person team was all that stood between them and that fate. I was the only medic. The plan was tight. Night insertion by Black Hawk, silent breach, lightning-fast exfil. My job was to stay in the bird until the all clear, then sprint in to stabilize and evac. I packed my trauma kits like my life depended on it. Because it did. Checked every needle, every clamp, every tube, a dozen times over. My hands didn't shake, but my heart was a war drum. Captain Aaron Davis locked eyes with me as we boarded the chopper, the rotor blades slicing the night. "No mistakes tonight, Morgan." "Not from me, sir," I said, and meant it. The Black Hawk hummed, carrying us toward the mountains, toward a moment that would define me, or end me. I didn't think about home. I didn't think about my parents' silence or Dylan's smug grin. I thought about the 3 lives waiting for me, about the team trusting me to bring them home. For the first time, I wasn't running from something. I was running toward it. 20 minutes from the target, the world turned to hell. Alarms blared through the Black Hawk, sharp and relentless. Major Reynolds' voice crackled over comms, fighting to keep us steady as gunfire peppered the chopper. Then a sickening jolt. Metal screamed, the bird lurched, and we slammed into a rocky ravine. The impact threw me against the wall, my vision fading to black. When I came to, smoke choked the cabin, blood pooling on the floor. My head throbbed, but I crawled to the cockpit. Major Reynolds was slumped, blood streaming from her scalp. Lieutenant Wilson's forearm was a mess, bone jutting out like a broken branch. No time to think. I braced her neck, slapped on a collar, wrapped his arm with one hand, and drew morphine with the other. Outside, gunfire erupted, a deadly chorus. "Morgan, hostiles incoming." Captain Davis's voice cut through the chaos, his rifle barking from behind a rock. I grabbed my kit, dragged Reynolds and Wilson to the tree line, my legs screaming with every step. Instinct took over. Not courage, not hope, just the muscle memory of training. We were surrounded. 12 of us, 2 critically wounded, no air support, and too much fire for extraction. We dug in, formed a perimeter, shared glances that said what words couldn't. I moved between the injured, crawling through dirt and bullets, swapping dressings, pushing fluids, listening to their ragged breaths and willing their hearts to keep beating. Then, Specialist Rivera went down, a round tearing through his thigh. I slid to him, tourniquet ready, bullets kicking up dust by my elbow. "Stay with me," I whispered. 2 more minutes, Rivera." "Doc," he rasped, eyes wide with fear. "Don't let me die like this." "You're not dying today," I said, tying the tourniquet tight. 4 hours dragged on, each second a lifetime. Then Master Sergeant Phillips took a hit to the chest. Collapsed lung. I jammed a needle into his ribcage, a penlight clenched in my teeth, the hiss of escaping air telling me he'd live. But they kept coming. A grenade exploded nearby, shrapnel ripping through my left leg. Pain burned like wildfire, but I saw Sergeant Kyle Bennett go down beside me. Chest wound, sucking air, fading fast. I didn't think. I dragged him 20 yards through dirt and screams, my leg trailing blood, his mixing with mine. I shielded him with my body, sealing his wound while whispering, "Your kids need you to fight, Kyle. So I need you to stay." His eyes locked on mine, and he nodded, clinging to life. By noon, our ammo was nearly gone. My hands shook from blood loss, my vision blurring. Captain Davis made the call. "Morgan, take the wounded, head east, we'll draw their fire." "I can't walk," I gritted out, pain clawing at me. "Then crawl." So I did. We rigged stretchers from webbing and branches. Me, 3 wounded soldiers, and a barely conscious pilot, moving up a cliffside trail with a compass, a sidearm, and medical tape holding us together. I passed out once, my face in the dirt, but Rivera's weak voice pulled me back. "Keep going, Doc." So we did. Every step was a fight. Against the pain, the weight, the fear we wouldn't make it. But I wasn't their daughter anymore, not their failure. I was Doc, the one they trusted to get them out, and I'd crawl through hell itself to bring them home. 48 hours of hell, and we finally hit the ridge. I collapsed beside the landing zone, my body screaming, my leg a mess of blood and bandages. The second Black Hawk dropped low, its roar a lifeline. I checked Major Reynolds' pulse one last time before we boarded. Strong, steady. A faint smile cracked my face, the first in days. We'd made it. Back at base, they stitched me up, debriefed me, and shoved a clipboard in my hands. Mission success, the analyst said, his voice matter of fact. Your radioed intel sparked a second operation. We got all 3 hostages out, and 24 more we didn't know were there. I stared, my brain struggling to catch up. What? The coordinates you called in under fire, he said. They revealed a second site on satellite imaging. You didn't know? I didn't. I'd just been doing my job, keeping my team alive, shouting coordinates into the radio while bullets tore past my head. I hadn't thought about what came next. You'll be in the report, he added. Classified, though. No one outside will know. Of course, my family would never hear about it. No one would. Just another secret swallowed by the war. In the hospital, my leg wrapped tight, my voice rough as gravel, I called home. I was injured, I said. I'm okay, but it was close. My dad's response was like a slap. Maybe this is a sign, Kayla. Time to find something stable. Enough of these adrenaline games. Adrenaline games. I almost laughed, the sound catching in my throat like broken glass. Games? I dragged 5 soldiers through a firefight, my hands the only thing keeping them from death. I'd crawled up a cliff with a hole in my leg, carrying their lives on my back. And he called it a game. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just hung up. The silence louder than any explosion. They'd never get it. Never ask, what happened out there? Never see the blood, the dirt, the lives I'd held together with nothing but gauze and grit. But it didn't matter anymore. Somewhere out there, 27 people were breathing free because of me. 5 others were alive because I refused to let them go. That was my truth. My anchor. It was enough, more than enough, even if my family never said the words I'd once craved. I wasn't their failure. I was Doctor. I was Sergeant Kayla Morgan. And I'd carved my worth in the sand where it mattered most. It was supposed to be a celebration. Dylan, my golden boy brother, had just gotten engaged to a sharp tax attorney from Manhattan, and my parents had pulled out all the stops for a Morgan family gala. Crystal chandeliers, polished silver, a string quartet humming in the background. Everything screamed perfection. I'd just finished physical therapy, my limp nearly gone, though my leg still ached like a bad memory. I showed up in my dress blues, not to flex, but because it was all I had that fit. My medals, the Purple Heart, the Commendation Medal, sat quietly on my chest, carrying the weight of every life I'd fought for with blood-soaked hands. My mom opened the door, her face flickering with surprise. Oh, Kayla, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow. You told me to come today, I said, my voice steady. Right, she said, already turning away. Well, come in. We're just getting ready. The house buzzed with laughter, clinking champagne flutes, and the kind of small talk that felt like a foreign language. Everything gleamed, except me. I was the odd piece, the one that didn't fit their polished puzzle. Dinner was a masterclass in erasure. Every conversation orbited Dylan, his swanky new condo, his firm's big IPO case, his Santorini honeymoon plans. I tried to speak, to slip into the chatter, but my words were brushed off like crumbs. Then Charlotte, Dylan's fiancée, turned to me, her eyes kind. What's it like, your job in the army? She asked. Is that a Purple Heart? Before I could answer, my dad cut in, his smile sharp enough to slice. Kayla's just doing a stint in the military. Nothing as interesting as corporate law. My mom rolled her eyes, waving a hand. She got injured in some training exercise or something. You know how the military hands out ribbons for everything these days? Something inside me broke. Not loudly, but deep. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I set my fork down, wiped my mouth, and said, quiet as a blade, it wasn't a training exercise. Silence. A beat too long. Then Dylan chuckled, leaning back. Come on, Kayla. Don't be dramatic. You probably tripped over a tent stake or something. I stood, my hands trembling just enough to notice. I pressed them flat against the table, anchoring myself. And then I let it out. Every word deliberate, like laying down cards I'd held too long. I was hit by shrapnel from a grenade. My team was ambushed. Our helicopter crashed 3 miles from the objective. I stabilized 6 wounded soldiers under fire for 8 hours straight, bullets chewing the dirt around us. I crawled through sand with a piece of metal in my leg to drag a man, bleeding out, to cover while bullets screamed over our heads. I performed a needle decompression on a collapsed lung with a flashlight in my teeth and a plastic tube while artillery shook the ground. And I stayed awake for 48 hours, barely able to stand, to lead the injured through enemy territory because they were too broken to walk. The room was a vacuum. No clinking glasses, no murmured chatter. Just silence, heavy and sharp. I looked at them. My mother, her lips parted. My father, staring at his plate. Dylan, his smirk gone. Not one met my eyes. I stood there waiting for something. Anything. A question. A nod. A flicker of pride. But the silence stretched, and I knew. They'd never see me. Not the woman I'd become, not the lives I'd saved, not the scars I carried. And for the first time, I didn't care. I'd fought for my worth in the dirt and fire, and no one, not even them, could take that from me. I stood there, the weight of my medals pressing against my chest, my voice trembling not from weakness, but from the years of truth I'd buried. "You don't ask me what I do," I said, my eyes sweeping the silent table. "You never have. You've never wanted to know who I became. All you see is the life I didn't choose, the daughter you didn't get." My voice cracked, raw with everything I'd held back. "Do you even tell people what I do? Or do you pretend I don't exist? Do your colleagues know your daughter treated a soldier who lost half his face and held his hand until he stopped screaming? That she wrote a letter to his mother while scrubbing his blood from her fingernails?" My father cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. "Kayla, I don't think this is the time." "No." I cut him off, my voice like steel. "It's exactly the time. You said the military is for people with no options, but I've done things none of you could survive. I've watched people die. I've kept people from dying. I've given everything, my body, my sleep, my peace, for strangers." I stepped back, the truth spilling out like blood from a wound. "Not once, not one damn time have any of you said, 'Kayla, I'm proud of you.'" My mother's face crumpled, but not with guilt, more like she was embarrassed. "We just worry you're wasting your potential," she said, her voice thin. "Wasting my life?" I shot back, sharp enough to cut. "Tell me, when you read about 27 hostages rescued in the Middle East last month, did you know I gave the coordinates under fire? That your disappointment of a daughter had something to do with it?" Their faces froze, stunned into silence. "Did you wonder how I got the Distinguished Service Cross? Not for some charity tour, but for dragging people through hell to get them home alive?" No one spoke. The air was thick, suffocating. "I've written letters to parents who lost their kids," I went on, my voice steady now, "telling them their sons died brave, even when they died scared. I've watched blood pool under a man's spine and prayed he wouldn't feel it. And every time I survived, I came back hoping, stupidly, that you'd see me. Not the GPA, not the rejection letters, not the failure. Me, the woman who kept going when everything hurt." My brother shifted, opening his mouth, but I stopped him with a look. "Do you know what they call me in my unit? Doctor, they trust me. They bleed for me. They follow me into fire. And you?" I turned to him. "You laughed." I faced my mother. "You called my uniform a costume. That costume kept a father of 3 from bleeding out in the dirt. It's been soaked in more strangers' blood than I can count. It earned more respect in one night than I've gotten from you in 28 years. My father finally spoke, his voice low, strained. "We always expected more." "More?" I whispered, a bitter laugh escaping. "More than crawling through hell to keep someone alive? More than surviving things you'll never imagine? More than valor, sacrifice, integrity?" You didn't want a daughter, I said. You wanted a puppet. I turned and walked out, the clink of champagne glasses fading behind me. In the driveway, the tears finally came, not from weakness, but from the weight of years spent chasing their approval. The daughter who'd bitten her tongue, who'd begged to be seen, was gone. My phone buzzed. A text from Staff Sergeant Monica Torres. How's the leg? How's the family? I typed back one word. Worse. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. No hello, just Monica's voice, fierce and steady. I'm coming. Text me the address. Don't move. For the first time that night, I wasn't alone. What about you? Have you ever felt your family couldn't see your worth? Have you had to stand up and speak your truth even when it broke the fragile peace? Share your stories below, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to stay silent. It started with a phone call I nearly ignored. I was at Walter Reed, gripping Captain Rodriguez's arm as he took his first steps on prosthetic legs, his face twisted in pain but his eyes burning with grit. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, DC area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up, breathless. Sergeant Kayla Morgan? A calm voice asked. Yes, sir. Report to the office of the Secretary of the Army tomorrow, 0900. Dress uniform. Congratulations, Sergeant. The line went dead. My heart pounded. What the hell was this? The next morning, I stood in a Pentagon office, my boots polished to a mirror shine, my pulse hammering. A brigadier general and a civilian with a White House pin sat across from me. The general slid a folder over. Sergeant Morgan, for your actions during Operation Silent Retrieval, you're being awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. The president will present it next week. I blinked, my mouth dry. That's a mistake, I said softly. I was just doing my job. The White House guy leaned forward. Your intel saved 27 hostages. You saved 15 lives under fire, wounded yourself. That's not a job, Sergeant. That's heroism. I couldn't speak. That night, I sat on my bunk, staring at the White House invitation, its gold seal glinting. I thought of my family, their laughter, their dismissal, their years of silence. Should I invite them? After everything? The part of me that still remembered being their daughter typed a text. I'm receiving the Distinguished Service Cross next Thursday. The president will present it. 2 p.m. You're welcome to attend. Hours later, my mom replied, We'll check our schedules. Your father may have a faculty meeting. I laughed, bitter and hollow. The day came, DC glowing under a perfect sky. The White House East Room was all precision. Rows of chairs, a gleaming podium, 4 other recipients beside me. I stood tall, medals aligned, hands steady despite the storm in my chest. Then I saw them. My parents and Dylan, awkward in the back, overdressed and out of place. My father checked his watch. My mother clutched her purse like a shield. Dylan looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The ceremony began. Each citation read with full honors, the words echoing like thunder. Then my turn. Sergeant Kayla Morgan distinguished herself by exceptionally valorous conduct. The aide detailed the ambush, the crashed Black Hawk, my care for 6 wounded under fire, the intel I radioed that saved 27 hostages and stopped terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. The room went quiet. The president stood, pinning the Distinguished Service Cross over my shoulders. Its weight settled into me, heavier than I'd imagined. He didn't just shake my hand. He looked me in the eyes, his voice low and deliberate. Sergeant Morgan didn't just save her team. She made possible the rescue of innocent civilians who would have died without her courage. She prevented attacks on our soil. Then, quieter, just for me. My brother was one of those hostages. The aid worker in the blue shirt, shot in the abdomen. You stabilized him. My breath caught. I remembered him. Pale, young, blood pooling as I pressed my hands into his wound, whispering, Stay with me. You're almost home. He's alive because of you, the president said. My family owes you a debt we can't repay. He stepped to the microphone, addressing the room. This award isn't just a medal. It's a testament to a woman who chose courage over comfort, duty over doubt. Sergeant Kayla Morgan saved more American lives than anyone will ever know. The room erupted in applause, a standing ovation that shook the air. At the back, I saw them. My mother, frozen, eyes glistening. My father, mouth parted, watch forgotten. Dylan, speechless, pale as a ghost. They'd mocked my uniform, called it a costume. Now that uniform had saved the president's own brother. For the first time, they saw me. Not the failure, not the disappointment, but the woman who'd fought, bled, and carried lives through fire. And in that moment, their silence didn't matter. I'd earned my place, not in their world, but in one that mattered more. The applause hit like a tidal wave, the entire room on its feet, a roar of respect that shook the White House walls. Everyone stood, except my family. They sat, frozen, faces caught in a mix of shock and something else, like the ground had shifted beneath them. For the first time, they saw me. Not the failure, not the disappointment, but the woman I'd become. A hero, not in their eyes, but in the eyes of a room full of people who knew what I'd done. At the reception, they approached, hesitant, like they were stepping into a world they didn't belong in. My father spoke first, his voice softer than I'd ever heard. That was quite a ceremony. "Thank you for coming," I said, keeping my tone even, my guard up. My mother grabbed my sleeve, her eyes glistening. "We had no idea," she whispered, "about any of it." "You never asked," I said, simple and true. Dylan, usually so quick with a smirk, looked hollowed out. "The things they said? You really did all that?" Before I could answer, Major Davis stepped up behind me, his presence like a wall. "She did more," he said, no introduction needed. When we were pinned down, she crawled through open fire to treat a man with a collapsed lung. She was bleeding herself. Didn't stop. Half of us wouldn't be here without her. My family stood silent, their usual deflections nowhere to be found. The reception swirled around me. Handshakes from the Surgeon General, a nod from a State Department official, and then 3 of the aid workers I'd helped save. They wrapped me in hugs, tears streaming. "My 5-year-old still has her mom because of you," one whispered, her voice breaking. I swallowed hard, the weight of her words heavier than the metal around my neck. Across the room, my parents watched, not with pride, not with judgment, just quiet, like they were seeing a stranger. Dylan approached again, alone this time. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low. I was arrogant. I didn't even try to know. "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "You didn't. Can we start over?" I didn't answer. The question hung there, unanswered, because I wasn't sure we could. My mother stepped up, tears spilling now. "I thought we lost you," she said. "I didn't realize we almost lost you for real." "You didn't want to see," I said softly. It was easier to pretend I wasn't doing anything that mattered. Then my father, the man who'd spent decades lecturing the world, stood before me with no words left. "I've been a professor for over 30 years, he said, his voice unsteady. "I've never earned the kind of respect I saw in that room today. I see you now, Kayla. And I'm ashamed it took this long." I nodded, my throat tight. But I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. The years of dismissal, the laughter, the silence, they weren't erased by a single ceremony or a late apology. I'd fought too hard, bled too much to let their words fill the space I'd carved for myself. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. Another text from Monica Torres. "You good, Doc?" I smiled, the ache in my chest easing just a fraction. My family might never fully understand, but out there in the dirt and fire, I'd built a family who did. And that was enough. I turned from my family, my gaze sweeping the room. Generals in crisp uniforms, officers with stern nods, soldiers who grinned and called me Doc like it was my true name. These were the people who'd seen me, really seen me, long before my family ever tried. They knew the weight of my choices, the blood on my hands, the lives I'd pulled back from the edge. And I smiled, not because I needed their validation, but because I'd found my own. The world now knew the truth I'd carried for years. My family had called me worthless, a disappointment chasing adrenaline games. But today, the commander-in-chief had looked me in the eyes and said, Sergeant Kayla Morgan saved more American lives than anyone will ever fully know. His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of 27 hostages freed, 15 soldiers alive, and attacks on U.S. soil stopped because of me. And for once, my family believed him. I saw it in their faces. My mother's trembling lip, my father's stunned silence, Dylan's pale shock. They couldn't unsee it now. Not with the president's voice echoing, not with the Distinguished Service Cross gleaming on my chest. But it wasn't their belief that mattered. Not anymore. I'd spent years chasing their approval, bending myself to fit their mold. Now, standing in that White House room, surrounded by people who knew what I'd done, what I'd survived, I realized I didn't need them to see me. I'd fought for my worth in the dirt, under fire, with blood on my hands and shrapnel in my leg. I'd earned it in the eyes of my team, my brothers and sisters who called me Doc. That was enough. More than enough. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. Monica Torres again. Proud of you, Doc. Drinks when you're back? I grinned, typing a quick, hell yes. My family might never fully understand, but I had a family out there who did. And in their eyes, I was home. Have you ever found your worth in the people who truly see you, even when those closest to you couldn't? What was the moment that made you realize you didn't need their validation? Share below. Your story matters. The White House ceremony didn't fix everything. There were no movie magic hugs, no tearful apologies that erased a decade of silence. But something cracked open, a shift so subtle I almost missed it. It started with an email from Dylan. Signed up to volunteer with Wounded Warriors this weekend, he wrote. Thought I'd start by listening. No grand gesture, just a step. Then my dad called, his voice halting. There's a veterans panel at the university. They needed a speaker on trauma and resilience. I gave them your name. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Recognition, maybe, after years of dismissal. Then came my mom. One Sunday, she showed up at the VA hospital where I volunteered, a tray of homemade banana bread in her hands. She looked at the rows of wheelchairs and walkers, her face pale. I don't know what to say to them, she whispered. You don't have to say anything, I told her. Just sit, listen. So she did. For 3 hours, she poured coffee, passed tissues, held hands with veterans whose stories she'd never imagined. No talk of sorority fundraisers or my dad's lectures, just quiet presence. Outside, on a bench, she turned to me. I judged what I didn't understand, she said. You didn't fail us. We failed you. I nodded. It wasn't a full apology, but it was hers, and it was enough. Here's the truth. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. The Distinguished Service Cross didn't erase the scars, on my leg, in my head, or from years of being called a disappointment. But it did something bigger. It reminded me I never needed their validation. Every life I saved, every soldier who called me Doc, every moment I chose courage over comfort, that was mine. Earned, lived, survived. Now I run a nonprofit called Second Tour, supporting female combat medics transitioning to civilian life. We offer therapy, job training, a place to breathe without judgment. My mom donates supplies sometimes. Dylan shows up to paint walls. My dad even gave a guest lecture on moral injury and guilt in veterans. It's not perfect. We still argue, and I still carry wounds they'll never see. But I'm not carrying them alone anymore. If you're reading this, if you've ever felt invisible, worthless, or small, especially by your own family, listen to me. You matter. Not because of medals or titles, not because of what others say, but because of the battles you fought quietly, the ones no one saw. They called me worthless, but I stood in the White House, the president's words ringing. Sergeant Kayla Morgan saved more American lives than anyone will ever fully know. In that moment, I didn't just feel seen, I remembered who I'd been all along. Not their version, not their expectations, but me. Whole. Enough. I hope wherever you are, you remember who you are too. This is Hidden Family Revenge Stories. If Kayla's journey touched you or echoed your own, share your story below. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to never miss a story of truth, courage, and healing. We're here to tell the stories no one else will. Thank you for being part of this journey.